We had left off yesterday the whole concept of Echod. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echod. What is the meaning of Echod? And Rambam explains this very clearly in the laws of the fundamentals of Torah, that it doesn't mean he's one of a kind, he's unique, but rather he is everything. Nothing happens in existence. Existence means whatever was created by God, which is everything. The angels, the celestial, the terrestrial, the species, everything, they exist exactly as they're meant to exist because he wills they should exist that way. For no other reason. And if you should cease willing their existence, they don't exist. So everything is dependent on his will. That's why things exist. If he should will, it should cease to exist, it ceases to exist. We say every day in the Shachris service, in the Birchas Kriyishma, blessings of the Kriyishma, he renews every day, as a result of his goodness, the act of creation. Just as creation was ex nihilo, nothing existed before that, identically, continuously, there's an ongoing renewal of that creation. So if he should cease to will creation, everything reverts back to pre-creation, pre-existence. We find that Sinai, which we're going to read it soon, next week's reading, that God put a mountain over the heads of the Jews. And he gave us an ultimatum. And the ultimatum was, either you accept the Torah, or the world will revert back to pre-existence. What is that all about? God created the world with an objective. What was the objective? As we've been discussing, that the world, meaning mankind, should achieve a level of perfection. So they should be able to have a relationship with God, to establish that level of commonality, to spiritualize the person and spiritualize the world. And once the person is spiritualized and he achieves perfection within himself, he's able to have a relationship with God. As a physical being, where you have all the physical handicaps and shortcomings, you have no relevance to God. You only have relevance to God if you achieve a level of perfection which reflects his perfection. Now, how do you achieve that level of perfection? He gave us the Torah. The Torah is the commandments, positive, negative commandments. And if you live within that protocol of commandments, positive, negative commandments, every level of involvement, every initiative in that mode of behavior brings about a spiritualization within ourselves. We spiritualize our souls. Even our bodies are impacted positively as a result of engaging in the positive. You put on tefillin on your arm, on your head. Your arm and your heart, which is the emotion, is spiritualized because it generates a spiritual energy and creates an aura. You put that tefillin on your head and you have the right mindset that you dedicate your mind, which is the intellect, which is the neurological system, the brain, to God, the brain becomes spiritualized. It's impacted. And every moment we wear those tefillin, it continuously generates that level of spirituality. It's an infusion, a continuous infusion of holiness into our being. Doing these commandments, we get closer, we upgrade our status of spiritual beings, although we're physical. Because the essence of a Jew is a soul, is the neshama. So, but the neshama comes here deficient, Our responsibility is to upgrade it, to infuse it with these mediums, which are called mitzvos, which bring about that level of sanctity. Every positive commandment is predicated on a blessing which was legislated by the rabbis of the High Assembly, and the text is, Asher kidshonu b'mitzvosav v'tzivonu. We were sanctified with his mitzvos, and he commanded us. So what is the basis for sanctification? When you engage in the mitzvah, and you do the mitzvah, as God's commandment, in its innateness, it has an ability to generate this level of holiness. And we become sanctified. We take on a more consecrated status. In a lifetime, when you accumulate this kind of level of infusion, we create a worthiness and a commonality. We're able to cleave to God and have a share in the world to come. That's the concept. And God, every day, he tweaks existence. Because existence, so it says, God says to the Jews, he puts the mountain over our heads and he says, if you accept my Torah, what's the Torah? These are the mediums through which you spiritualize yourselves. Because if the objective is to perfect yourself, to be able to have the relation with God, otherwise you can't. So what's the value of existence? Existence has no creation, no purpose. Creation has no purpose. Therefore, he put a mountain over, as he says, if you accept the Torah, fine. Then you will meet and address the objective. But if you reject the Torah, you don't want to accept, I'm wasting my time. You're not here to be in paradise, the physical paradise. That's not what life's all about. Physical life is only a means to an end. And if you reject it, you don't accept it, the world reverts back to pre-existence, meaning God says, I cease willing existence. If God ceases willing existence, it reverts back to pre-existence. That's exactly what we're speaking about. Because since God is echad, and every aspect of existence is determined and dependent on his willing it, he's willing it for a reason. If he ceases to will it, it's over. It doesn't exist. So something which I taught just a few days ago in the Rambam, in the laws of the fundamentals of Torah, David says in Tehillim, we said every morning, that who praises God? The birds, the animals, the oceans, everything praises God. So we understand the human being praises God, because the human being is an intellectual, spiritual being. We have a soul, we have choice, we have an understanding, so we praise God. Angels praise God because, as Rambam explains, angels are intellectual beings. However, the reason why they don't have choice is because they're endowed with a level of clarity, of understanding who God is, that they will not deviate or veer from their understanding who God is. Therefore, the angel always fulfills the will of God, his mission, exactly as he's instructed. But it's not that an angel is a spiritual robot. An angel is not a spiritual robot. An angel is an intellectual being, but due to its level of clarity, based on that, that's why it fulfills its mission exactly as instructed by God. The 10 levels of angels, Rambam writes, 10. From the greatest to the smallest, each one has a level of understanding of God. And each one has a function. The greater the level of clarity and understanding it has of God's. No creation could fathom God, as we mentioned many times, because anything finite cannot fathom the infinite. But within the realm, the hierarchy of angels, there are different levels of angels. And based on the spiritual dimension, they have a greater understanding of God. So based on that, they serve God in their capacity as they're meant to serve God. The human being a composite of physical and material, we don't have that level of clarity. We don't have any relevance to even understanding God unless we take certain initiatives and we're taught and we spiritualize ourselves. And as a result of that, we have greater levels of clarity. But the level of clarity of a human being never will ever meet in human form, if we're in the composite form, to understand God the way an angel understands God. But it really doesn't make a difference. Because an angel, although its level of understanding is much beyond a human being, but an angel, its ability to comprehend and fathom is based on its endowment. A human being, its understanding of God is based on choice. It's only through human initiative, human investment. Therefore, Rav Chaim Volozhin explains, the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, Gedolim tzadikim yosim malchei ashoris, that a tzaddik, which is a human being, a devoutly righteous person, is greater than the greatest angel. Because the greatest angel, although he has an endowment of understanding, which we can't even relate to, but that understanding has nothing to do with the angel himself. He's endowed with that. A tzaddik, nobody's born a tzaddik. Nobody's born devoutly righteous. It was due to multiple and many challenges and choices did the person achieve that classification as tzaddik, which is due to his own choice. Therefore, the tzaddik, although he doesn't have an infinitesimal level of understanding of God as the angel, his innate value is greater than the angel. For that reason, that's Gedolim Tzadikim Yosim Malchei Ashoris. For that reason. Now, we know that the human being is far from perfect. Even the tzaddik is not perfect. King Solomon says in Koheles, "Ein tzaddik vorza sheyastov lo yachtor." There's no tzaddik who does only good and never sins. Every tzaddik has some degree of failing. Moshe Rabbeinu sinned. He failed. He struck the rock. He spoke out of turn initially, and that's why he didn't merit to go into the land of Canaan. Nobody's perfect. Avram made mistakes. As a human being, we don't have perfect understanding. And due to that slight blind spot, every once in a while, even the greatest tzaddik fails. There are only 4 people in the history of this world who never sinned. But outside of them, no one else. And these 4 people were not necessarily the greatest Jews who ever lived. Because very often, through challenges, and because a person who achieves greater things, they put themselves in certain situations where the environment causes a certain degree of misevaluation, which allows the person to make a mistake. You know, you stay in your own little corner there, and you only focus on you perfecting yourself, you're less likely to fail because you're not out there in the trenches. You're not out there fighting the battle on all 4 fronts. You're not there. But that's the reality. So because man continuously were in flux, even the tzaddik's in flux, he always maintains himself. So every day when God renews creation, or every moment, he always has to gear creation to accommodate mankind at where they are at that particular moment. I'll give you an example. Person is born. The parents have an infant outfit, custom made for the child. And now the child is 3 years old. The child outgrows it. And if when he's 10 years old, he has a custom made suit. When he's 15, that suit doesn't fit. So it has to be redesigned or expanded to accommodate the person's growth. Every moment to moment, we change. Either we advance or we regress. A human being is never stagnant. As a result of that, based on our behavior, God wills existence to provide that whatever level you were at, on many levels, what we're deserving, what challenges we need to be able to upgrade, to advance, So the energies which God releases, the world looks like the same world, but it's not exactly the same. Therefore, there's an ongoing renewal of creation that God continuously has to retweak existence to literally to reflect man's level, to be able for man to utilize existence to make a choice. Either you upgrade or you downgrade. Therefore, it's mechadish tuva b'cholim tomas. God continuously renews creation based from day to day, based on man's behavior. For that reason, I always say over from about Rav Haigo. There was a period before the period of the early commentators. It was called the Gaonic period. So Rav Haigo was one of the great people of this era, and Rav Haigo every day would do tshuva, would repent even though he didn't sin. Why did he tshuva even though he didn't sin? Because every day he upgraded. And when he upgraded to the next level, he realized where he could have been the day before. So he was always repenting. Why wasn't he at the point the day before that he was the following day? Because every person, we don't necessarily see where we could have been. We only recognize in hindsight opportunities which you could have taken advantage of, we did not. Not a question, why not? When you eat a meal, you can only eat so much. There's no claim against person, you should have eaten beyond your maximum. I maxed out, can't eat more. When it comes to spirituality, it's a whole different concept. We talk about revering God, loving God. A person has a newborn child. As much as the person knows the child is his child, it's his first child, it's almost like it's not yet emotional. There's no emotional attachment yet to the child. But as time goes on and you spend time with the child, there's an emotional attachment to that child. And the love grows. And as the child develops into a mature being, and the child has that special value to the parent, and the parent sees that child in that special context, reflecting many of his own characteristics, which are positive, the love continuously increases. Although it's the same child, but it keeps advancing. So do you say to the person, why you should have loved your child 3 years ago, so you love him today? I wasn't at that point yet because I didn't appreciate, I wasn't able to internalize the value of my child only now at that level. And if the child should go beyond that, develop even greater, and you have that intimate involvement with your child, continuous relationship, it increases, and it keeps increasing. Same thing with God. If you're continuously involved and you do something on a qualitative level, it's not just by rote you put on your tefillin. And when you say the Shema, you just say it. But you say it with focus and with humility and with submission. And the many, many aspects which enhance its value, you become a different person. There's a story, the Vilna Gaon lived in the 18th century. And the Vilna Gaon, although he lived in the time of the later commentators, he was out of the ordinary. He surpassed the greatness of all the earlier commentators, and he was within the classification of the early commentators. We're talking about the contemporaries of Nachmanides, Rabbeinu Shlomo ben Aderes. That's the level he was at, although he was born hundreds of years later. That was his greatness. And the Vilna Gaon for 40 years lived in a courtyard in Vilna, and the only people he was involved in were his students, his closest students. He would study with them, he would pray with them, and he had his private, what they call his private minyan. Outsiders only were there if they were invited to come. And there was a certain person, he always wanted to pray with that minyan. And he was invited, and he came to do Ma'ariv with the Vilna Gaon. and he heard the Vilna Gaon saying Shema. You understand? When you heard the Vilna Gaon saying Shema, articulating those words, seeing his level of submission to God, infused with a level that we can't even relate to. His grandfather just heard the Shema. The words coming out of Vilna Gaon's mouth, he became a different Jew. He was touched by just hearing the words, the way they were said, and seeing his facial expression. From then time on, it was difficult for him even to consider sinning. That's the degree he was impacted. So what do we see? You see that the experience is able to change you in a moment. This man was a devout, very special Jew. Otherwise, he would have been invited to that minyan of the Vilna Gaon. But experiencing and having that experience, and the Vilna Gaon was not a prophet. He was a holy man. He was great. He was out of his era. It doesn't make a difference. But you see what a person's potential could be. So if we take advantage of opportunity, initiatives, and we take those initiatives, we don't realize where we could have been. I'll give you an example. Two people study in the yeshiva, and they're in the same age, same class. One has the same intellectual capacity as the other. And one person takes advantage, and he really applies himself. The other person chose, it's not for me. And he leaves and he pursues other areas, other career, not in sync with Judaism, but he pursue to become this great, what we call Talmud Chacham, and this other person applied himself. Fast forward 40 years into the future, this person became one of the leading Torah sages of the generation. The other person, one of a kind of lawyer. You put one next to one another. The other person is a fine Jew, charitable, philanthropy, raises his children properly. But in terms of what he knows, what he is, and what he leads, and how he impacts the Jewish people, it's a different reality. Why? But the other person values his friend, which they grew up together, values it. And he believes in what the other person represents, and he'll support what the other person represents, but he's still not the other person. But if you understand it and appreciate it, and you revere it and esteem it, but unless you're that, you don't know what it is. It's a different understanding of who God is, because this person was immersed all these years in the ultimate level of spiritualization, which is the study of Torah. And as a result of that, the performance of the mitzvah is a different level of performance. As a result of the infusion within the person is a different level of infusion, because the understanding of the mitzvah is a different understanding. So the focus is different. It's a different reality. Rav Hai Gaon, every day, it was a new level of advancement. Rav Hai Gaon was a different person every day. He advanced from day to day. And he was like amazed. Why didn't I see this yesterday? And he attributed it to himself, because he didn't take sufficient initiative the day before. Otherwise, he could have been here the day before. And therefore, that was the basis why he would repent continuously. Because I could have accomplished more if I didn't. It was like, to give the example, Wall Street. Certain people appreciate that. Person has a phenomenal capacity to earn money for the company that he's working for. And initially, they understand his value. They offer him a tremendous salary, plus bonus and different levels of bonus based on what he brings into the company, how much money he generates. And the person generates money that in the history of the company, nobody ever generated, brought in that kind of money to the company. However, and he deserves the bonus. He's earned his salary. But the one who owns the company has an understanding of this person's capacity. He says, but you know what the truth is? Really, I can't clip your wings because he's so valuable to the company. But factually, based on my understanding of what your capability is, you could have produced 20% more profit for this company. Therefore, the bonus that I was considering giving you, I'm not giving you. If you would have fulfilled your capacity, you couldn't do more, I would have given you a higher bonus. But here, because I understand that you fell short of what you could and the company earned 20% less, you don't get that bonus which originally I was considering giving you. Because I have to give you, motivate you to go to that next level. So now that you know you didn't get it because you didn't achieve that extra 20%, now you're going to, next year, you're going to work for that harder to achieve that extra 20%. That's the understanding. Every one of us has phenomenal potential. And even if we're doing great, we're doing fine, we're doing outstanding, the question is, we still could do more outstanding to a greater degree. And I always put this question to everyone. Every one of us know in any area of our service of God, we could do it a little bit better. Definitely a little bit better. I would say we could even do a lot better. We could be less distracted, more focused. I'm saying even within the same period of time. You have 2 hours, whatever time you put a set aside, that time, what are you going to read? You read Jewish folklore. Well, I'm studying something about Judaism. Well, I have a Jewish encyclopedia. You read, but you realize that's not what it's about. I could study in-depth Talmud, and I choose to say Tehillim. You're not using your capacity. That's not what you're all about. You could be much more advanced. You could achieve a level of accomplishment. You could teach others. At this less level, you can't teach others. You don't have enough knowledge to be a disseminator of Torah. And that's got a claim against the person. Famous story with the Netziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, when he was a young boy, 12 years old. He was a very precocious young man, very smart. And his father was a very wealthy man, great Talmud Chacham. His parents came from a very prestigious, he had a very prestigious pedigree. And as much as his parents, his father tried to rein in on him and to encourage him to be more studious and everything, he was always distracted doing other things. One night, he overhears a conversation between his father and mother when he's 12 years old, that the father says to the mother, until now, I thought he has a future in Torah. But now I realize he doesn't, because he's so distracted. And by this age, he should be more focused. I have to teach him, we have an obligation, I have to teach him a livelihood. A father has an obligation to teach a livelihood to a son. We're going to apprentice him to a shoemaker, to a cobbler, we'll teach him how to make shoes. So at least in the future, he has what to rely on to earn a living. He overheard this conversation. When he heard what his parents were considering to do on his behalf, he was like taken aback. He didn't realize to what point did he disappoint his parents and what they believed he could have been, and he chose not to be that. So he came to his parents and he cried and he begged them to give him another chance. And they gave him another chance. And he became the Netziv, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, who was the head of the Volozhina Yeshiva in this small town in Lithuania called Volozhin. It produced the greatest Torah scholars of Europe in the 1800s. Rav Chaim Brisker married his granddaughter, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik. He married into the family of Rav Chaim Volozhina, who was the primary student of Vilna Gaon. Okay? One day, he makes a banquet for all the students in Volozhin. And he says to them, and they couldn't understand what's the occasion. So he says, the occasion is because I just put out my commentary on Chumash. My commentary is called Hamek Dover. It means delving into the issues, to elucidate the Torah. But they said, such a banquet. It was more than just a celebration. It was like out of the ordinary. So he gets up to speak. And he says, After 120 years, you come before the heavenly court, and you're a person, you rise every morning, 5 a.m, and you study for 2-3 hours before you go pray. And you pray, then you go to work, and you're honest. You only even give discounts to the poor, you give charity, you take a break to do mincha, and then at night, you do Ma'ariv. After you eat dinner, you go back to the Beis Medrash, the study hall, to study Torah, and you study till your last ounce of strength, and you go to sleep. And this is the way you live your life. Shabbos, Yom Tov, you don't talk business, only Torah discussion. So the man is literally a living tzaddik. So the person thought they're going to bring him straight to the box seats. They're not going to leave him in the bleachers. All of a sudden they say, no, you're going to stay in the bleachers. You're not going to be behind home plate. No, it's not going to happen. So he says to him, why? So all of a sudden they take out a mural and they see a person who looks like a Torah sage who authored 40 works. And they say to him, why weren't you this person? He said, what does that person have to do with me? He says, because if you wouldn't have been apprenticed to be the shoemaker, that's who you would have been. And he's like, the person is shocked. I could have been that. He said, yes, but because you made certain choices, therefore you're this devout shoemaker, believing that you're maxing out and everything, and you're holy and you are holy, but factually, that was your potential. So the Tziv says, thank God I overheard that conversation between my parents when they wanted to apprentice me as the shoemaker, and therefore putting out this commentary on the Chumash, that's part of the mural that they're going to show me after 120 years. That's the story. So, but as they say, only God knows. But one thing, even only God knows, but we know something also. We could all do better. We could do a little bit better. Maybe a lot better, but definitely a little bit better. Knowing that, and God tweaking existence, because everything emanates from him, because he wills existence every moment based on the valuation of where things are at, understanding that we always have to try to do minimally a little bit better.